All right. Hey, everybody. We're 26 minutes late, which I think by Berlin standards means we're early. Good morning. So before I dive in, I just want to sort out some metadata. So this is a lightning talk, right? And there's other lightning talks. OK, so how long do you want me to talk? 10 minutes? OK. So this is a 90-minute presentation, so I'm going to spend about 3 seconds per slide. That's totally fine. It's totally fine. I should probably just talk and probably not do too much with slides, but I'm going to have them here just to have a crutch in case I get nervous or something. Do you want to just give me a heads up at when there's two-ish minutes left? OK, perfect. Yeah. So I'll start with a tiny bit of background about myself. So I'm Lane. I have done a bunch of things. I've been a software developer my entire career, so it's very much my self-identity is an engineer. I kind of tend to think about things through that lens primarily, kind of in a very kind of structured, hierarchical sort of way. Rely a lot on kind of logic and rationality. Background doing finance and a bunch of other stuff. For the past roughly 18 months or so, I was an Ethereum core developer, so I helped work on a particular piece of the Ethereum 1x, Ethereum 2 roadmap called EWASM, which is building a virtual machine to run smart contracts. So very much focused on the code, but at the same time kept coming back to the social human side of Ethereum, right? And so in a nutshell, I would my sort of realization was that while I think the tech of Ethereum is in really good shape and really good hands and progressing well. Of course, there's a lot to be done, but it's making rapid progress. I don't believe that to be the case for the human side of things. And there's a reason for that, which is that the incredible people who conceived of and designed and built Ethereum, right, to whom we owe an enormous amount of gratitude. I think we all know who those people are. Have the same engineering mindset that I have, so I empathize with that. But Ethereum, despite everyone, no one really expected it to happen, but it kind of exploded and became a thing faster than people thought it would, and suddenly there were billions of dollars of value at stake. And I think this is just true in general of projects. When there's very little at stake, when it's a bunch of friends hanging out, eating pizza, hacking on something, you don't really need governance. It's totally cool if it's 5 people, 10 people, right? The point of governance, one way of conceptualizing governance is it's a tool to scale trust. Social scalability is what Nick Szabo calls this. Super interesting topic. So we're past this inflection point, and now Ethereum is at the stage where holy crap, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of different interest groups. And so I think it's really essential that if we want this project to succeed or have a chance of having even a small fraction of the impact of its potential to impact the world and people everywhere, it's time for us to have these very hard conversations about governance and about all the related topics like funding and distribution of power and authority and wealth and all these kinds of things. So that's kind of been my motivating desire for the past kind of year or so. So I've just begun thinking a lot about this and working with amazing people like the DGOV team, Commonwealth Labs, a gentleman named Michael Zargum. He has a company called Block Science that does a lot of research on complex systems, system design, that sort of thing, right? All these things are relevant, as well as, of course, Koala. So that's kind of the background. So I'm kind of an engineer at heart, but have been thinking and working more and more on the social and kind of human side of things. This is a presentation that I gave, so you will have seen this, right, at the Koala Summit in Italy back in March, April, something like that, April. And then again online. And so we can find and share the URL for this. So the full, I think it's actually 2 hours, the recording, because we had some of the members of Koala join and ask questions. So needless to say, we're only going to be able to scratch the surface in the 6-7 minutes we have left. But hopefully this is the beginning of a conversation. And yeah, let's, it's lots of open space. We could continue over there or something if people are interested. Yeah, so check it out. It was great. And they were amazing. So one of the great things about Koala is that it's not just blockchain people. It's not primarily, right? It's more legal scholars and philosophers and experts in things like political science. And I think that one of the reasons that Ethereum has struggled with governance is because none of those people were part of the conversation previously, right? And again, now we're past this inflection point. We're at a point where we need to there's this blank slateism in blockchain, especially in Ethereum, which is it's sort of seditious and it's sort of reactionary and it's kind of screw the system. We believe the existing system and social structures are unfair and biased, and the economy is not a level playing field, et cetera. Like, I echo all those sentiments, but so there's an overreaction and over-optimization in the direction of like, throw everything out. We're going to start with a totally clean slate. And so part of again, I feel like my personal mission has been to begin to loop in some of these amazing thinkers in the fields like philosophy and ethics and political science, et cetera, and just bring these two sides together and learn from one another. And like, Koala is a great platform to do that. So definitely check out, it's the koala.global, I think is the URL, and it's with a C, COALA.global. So yeah, maybe we'll just talk about the first couple bullet points because we don't have time to do too much more. So yeah, a little bit of history on Ethereum. The main point of this slide was just to show that it's a very young project. It only launched 4 years ago, basically. So I kind of like to show these slides, like talking about the social scalability. Like, this was Ethereum in 2014. Jeff and Gav and Vitalik hacking on things, right? This was DevCon 0 a little bit later that year. This is DevCon 1 in 2014. You can see the number of people, the diversity growing slightly, right? This is DevCon 2, so this was Shanghai in 2015. Now we have hundreds of people in the room. This is DevCon 3, so this is when I have an off by one error here, sorry. This is DevCon 2. This is Shanghai in 2016, so again, you can see there's like hundreds and hundreds of people in the room now. This is DevCon 3. This was in Cancun in 2017, so this is when I joined. And you can kind of, like, I think a picture shows 1,000 words. You can see the professionalization here. Like, as the project professionalizes, as the size and diversity of the stakeholder groups grow. This is last year's DevCon. Like, wow, right? All of a sudden we have like order, and you can't even fit all the people in one image anymore. So one of the governance mechanisms Ethereum has is this bi-weekly core devs call. And so again, rewind, like, this is just over 2 years ago. There were 5 people on this call. Like, these are the humans who are like making decisions on behalf of the network, right? And this is a call earlier this year. There were 38 people here, and these calls have gone up as many as 70 people now. The software is more professional. Just a huge explosion in this number of stakeholders. This is the Fellowship of Ethereum Magicians meeting here in Berlin last summer. That was DevCon last year. So there's an important distinction between these two concepts. I'd like to highlight this in the beginning. The potential of a platform like Ethereum, to me, like, it represents something different to many different people, right? It's sort of like a mirage in the sense that like 10 people can look at Ethereum from 10 different angles and see 10 different things, and you can kind of project your desires or your hopes onto it because it's such a general purpose tool. For me personally, the potential of Ethereum and sort of the end game for me is using it to build better governance systems. That's what I call governance of blockchain, right? So this is using tools like DAOs to begin to replace some of the broken, corrupt, unfair institutions we have in the legacy world. So you can think of this as, the most obvious example is like building a better financial system, better banks, but it can be better governments or governance systems for more general purpose groups, local communities, things like that. It can be sort of, for interest groups, all sorts of examples here. But we can't have governance, that's governance by blockchain, right? That's using the blockchain to govern things in the real world. We can't have governance by blockchain until we figure out how to govern the blockchain infrastructure itself. So this is the point that we're stuck on, and that's what this presentation is about. There are really amazing thinkers like Primavera de Filippi is one. She's one of the founders and one of the people who runs Koala. So she's done a lot of work on the governance by blockchain piece. But I'm at the moment, like, that's the exciting stuff, but we need to figure this stuff out first. I'm gonna maybe spend, okay, perfect, yeah. I'll spend maybe the remaining, maybe a minute or two on this slide, because this is an interesting one. So when we talk about governance, it's really helpful to ask, like, what are we governing? And I think people tend to kind of skip this, and you'll hear, if you pay attention to amazing people at events like this talking about governance, Ethereum governance, or for that matter, like Polkadot governance, right? We need to do this, we need to do that. Like, before we have that hard conversation, like what are we even trying to govern in the first place? It's not monolithic. Like, Ethereum is this weird chimeric thing. It's this combination of some real world entities, some on-chain things. Like, there's this complex Venn diagram. So like some of the examples of this are the Ethereum Foundation, right? That is an actual legal entity. It is a Swiss Stiftung. It has a board of directors. It controls resources. It's very specific. It exists in the real world and meat space. There's the community, right? This is also like humans, flesh and blood humans, but it's much more vague. And we've made many attempts to like draw lines around the Ethereum community. This is the community. This is not the community. Very hard to do. There's the protocol, right? So that's a fairly concrete thing as well. That's kind of like the specification. You could think of it in Ethereum as kind of the yellow paper. But then there's these client implementations that implement the protocol imperfectly. So there's not a perfect one-to-one mapping between protocol and implementations. And in particular, in some cases, there's like a bug that makes it into one implementation, and the bug becomes canonical because it's an example of like the code overruling the specification. So that happens. And again, distinction there. Each of them is governed differently. We have multiple. There's the network itself, right? So every person who owns, operates a node governs that node themselves. There's the data layer. So this is a really important distinction. Like we have many of these, right? We have mainnet, we have testnets, we have actually hundreds of networks that execute that same code or the same clients. Each of them is different. Each of them has its own governance. And then we have like applications running on top of it. So it's a very complex thing. And so answering this question about like when we dive into how we govern things, this is the starting point, I think. And I think, yeah, so the rest of this talk focuses on these points, the protocol and kind of the data layer. I think these are the most complex and interesting. Check out the talk. I think if you Google state of Ethereum governance, maybe with my name, like you'll find it, but we can also share a link. Thank you.
Do you want to stay for questions?
Sure, yeah, people have questions, yeah.
Great, thank you, Lane. So we're going to just have a couple minutes of questions if anybody has something they want to ask Lane. Max?
Yeah, it was really interesting to learn yesterday a bit more about how Ethereum Foundation works, because like the problem is it's not described anywhere, you know, like what are the processes and so on. Can you maybe share some things like how they see their role in the in the governance overall? Do they see their like as facilitators, and if so, like how they solve this?
That's a great question. The short answer is no, unfortunately. I can't speak on behalf of the foundation, and it's extremely opaque. Like for reasons that are a bit beyond my comprehension, they've chosen to operate with very minimal transparency. I certainly personally feel that that's a mistake because I think that there's a cost in legitimacy, and I think that like my feeling is that the foundation or any foundation that was funded in the way that the Ethereum Foundation was funded, is of and by and for the people and the community members. So I'd certainly like to see a lot more transparency. I guess what I can say is just that, it's a group of people that have a set of beliefs about, the future of the Ethereum protocol, and they've done enormous work getting us to where we are, right? And so that, again, we need to be grateful for that. I think their official answer to the question of the role of the Ethereum Foundation is sort of addressing the public good, right? So kind of like funding projects and things that don't have a business model, but that are critical for the infrastructure of the network. I think they are doing that, but I think there's also a lot of infrastructure and public good that EF is not funding for various reasons. And so another interesting topic under governance is, do we want to fund the public good? How do we want to fund the public good?
Cool, maybe just one more quick one. Louis?
Thank you very much for the beginning of this talk, and I will definitely check it out online. I'm wondering, like on a higher level note, like you now have like some experience, like being like working with the Ethereum people and on Ethereum governance and thinking a lot about it. Like, where do you guys come from? Like, where were you like 2 years ago? Do you feel there's progress? Where are you now? What's your feeling on all this?
So you mean like what were my thoughts about Ethereum then, and what are my thoughts about it now? Kind of, yeah.
Where were you like 2 years ago in terms of governance also? Like, and do you feel it's progressing? And do you feel like are you optimistic, or are you in this kind of like struggling to?
Sure. Man, that's a great question. I think 2 years ago, I was very captivated by what I first saw when I came into the Ethereum community. So that's an amazing group of people, like honestly the best humans collectively that I've ever had the chance to meet or work with or interface with around the world. Ethereum community is just head and shoulders above the vast majority of communities, I think, today, as well as just super exciting technology and very high potential project. Very, very captivated, and I had a very engineer mindset at that time, so I wasn't thinking a lot about governance. I think the short answer to your question is like, I've sort of journeyed into the heart of Ethereum, the technology and the community over the past year and a half, 2 years, and I've come back and like I saw and experienced a lot of good things and a lot of really awful things. I am very, very I'm very long-term optimistic. I think Ethereum still has very high potential. I'm short-term very pessimistic. I think that there are enormous challenges in front of the community that the community is just like not capable at this moment of kind of having an honest conversation, an honest, informed conversation. There's a lot of naivete. There's a lot of fear or just hesitance, ignorance and hesitance to interact with those other groups of people, with the experts, the philosophers, the people who understand things like political science and political theory, et cetera. And the Ethereum right now, because there is no explicit governance, unfortunately, in large part has been captured by this tyranny of structurelessness, right? Which happens in the situation where you have no like explicit governance. I think short term, like Ethereum is going to continue to be bound by that, and that will really limit its ability to kind of grow and scale and appeal to more people. But I am long term optimistic, and this is one of the reasons, right? Because even if hypothetically, like the existing Ethereum network, the main net, isn't able to escape from that, Ethereum as an idea, as a meme, as a set of values will live on in many different forms. Great question. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Lane.